While most people's food journey begins in the fluorescent aisles of a grocery store, ours starts just steps from our back door, in the soil. This is the story of how we grew, harvested, and preserved nearly all our food over the past year. But to understand why we do this, let me take you back a bit. 7 years ago, after experiencing health problems, I discovered that eating homegrown vegetables and fruits made my symptoms disappear. For years, we grew what we could in our small yard, but I'd seen so much improvement in my health that we hoped to expand the garden and what we could grow. In 2020, we bought our dream land in the country, and the first priority was putting in an orchard and a garden. We grew all the vegetables that we ate that year. Our vision was to create a homestead with biodiversity where we could go beyond growing just a few vegetables. For health reasons, I hoped to grow the most nutrient-dense food possible. To accomplish this goal, we spent the next 5 years growing not only vegetables, but also raised animals for our meat supply, planted more fruit trees, berries, and even experimented with growing our own wheat. Adding animals was the key to reducing our labor and inputs. We added cows to fertilize the land and mow, and used rotational grazing so that the land could rest in between grazing. Then came pigs to improve our forest edges. Chickens and turkeys kept our bug populations low. It sounds fairly simple, but where we live, if you create an oasis in the middle of a food desert, every animal and bug in the area will want to enjoy it too. So over those first 5 years, we also added infrastructure like a fence around the garden and orchard. Due to our harsh conditions, we also added a caterpillar tunnel so we could grow fresh food through the winter. We built a garden shed, then we built a high tunnel, and finally, as we entered 2025, we started by building our second high tunnel.
Let's try to get to 18, we should be fine.
We decided to add another tunnel because our first helped us triple the amount of food we could produce in one area. The tunnel also helps us to have more control over weather swings. We can keep off the excessive rainfall we often receive in the spring, add shade cloth for protection from the heat in the summer, and extend our growing season into the fall and winter. Our second high tunnel build was not without its challenges though. Towards the end of the build, we put on the plastic, but couldn't get it tight because it was cold and wet. We pinned a few parts down and came back out to finish it when the weather was dry. That's where things really started to go wrong.
The wind is kind of picked up a little more than we thought, and it's starting to rip this tarp to shreds. So I'm gonna try and repair it before we have to order a new one. That's already torn. This is what I have to try to control. So, wish me luck. I just texted Becky. I don't think we can save this tarp.
By a miracle, the wind died down for a few hours and we figured out we could take the plastic and pull it down over the ripped off back edge and then secure it. Then on the front edge, we taped over the holes and were able to save the plastic. Luckily, we finished this project just in time.
At the beginning of the year, I was 8 months pregnant and knew that the baby could arrive any day. So the day came in the middle of January as I was gardening. I went into labor and we were so excited to meet our newest member of the family, Bear. During my recovery, Cam knocked out a project that had been on our list for a long time, remodeling our pantry so we could store more food. By March, it was time to get moving with planting our year's supply of food. This year, we decided to up our game and ensure more food security by planting more perennials. The first was planting muscadine grapes. They're native to the South and they're huge producers that aren't as disease-prone as table grapes. Once we got those planted, we moved on to the blackberries. We already had blackberries growing, but I had spaced them too far apart, so we took any blackberries that were growing outside of the row and replanted them in the gaps. Some of the thornless varieties we grow aren't very vigorous, so we needed to purchase some extras too to fill in those gaps. We also planted a new row of Kiowa blackberries, a very thorny variety that grows massive berries. In our newest high tunnel, we plan to grow strawberries, table grapes, and our favorite juicing grapes. Both strawberries and these types of grapes are prone to fungal diseases. As such, the tunnel would provide the protection they need from rain to help prevent disease without chemical sprays. Before we could plant, we needed to prepare the soil. Inside the tunnels, we've had good success in the past with layering on materials, so we utilize that same method again. We start by laying a thick paper on the ground, then add 3 inches of compost, and in between the garden beds, we add mulch. It works fairly well at weed prevention, but strawberries require a little extra protection from weeds, so we put another layer of paper on the top to prevent as many weeds as possible. We took all the runners from our current strawberry plants that were growing in the other tunnel and then planted them in the new tunnel. I was rushing to get the job done and picked a day when it was hot and dry to transplant. Unfortunately, many of the plants wilted because of the conditions. So we tried again getting runners and transplanting them. But this day we were a little smarter and did it on a cool, cloudy day. And immediately following planting, Cam set up irrigation. It was a success. Next was planting grapes. We planted an entire row of slipskin juicing grapes like Concord, Mars, Fredonia, and then a variety called Vanessa for the table grapes. Now that most of the perennials were planted, it was time to move forward with planting our annual vegetable garden. It's a massive undertaking because we grow all the food for our family of 8 year-round. When I had the baby in January, Cam had 3 months of paternity leave from work. In April, we were approaching him going back to his full-time job, and even though we had been growing this amount of food for years, I was feeling super overwhelmed and anxious at the thought of taking care of our nearly half-acre garden, mostly on my own with a new baby and toddler in tow. That's not to say that Cam and the kids don't help, because they do. But they aren't home as much as me, and there are a lot of hours not documented on camera where I am weeding, on bug patrol, and doing ordinary tasks to keep the plants growing well. So I came up with a game plan of 2 major things that needed to be finished before Cam went back to work. One was weed prevention, and the other was irrigation. Having both of those in place would save hundreds of hours of labor in the garden.
So I had partially set up irrigation in the vegetable garden and around the berry plants in 2024. But as we went into our 2025 season, I really needed to finish this job. We had some issues with hoses getting run over by the lawnmower, so I ran a line of irrigation underground to all the berry rows to avoid this in the future. Here in Arkansas, we hardly ever need supplementary water early in the growing season, but when we get to summer, we do usually hit a period of several weeks of really dry weather, and all of a sudden the plants are desperate for water. In the past, when dry spells would happen, we would do our best to water the plants by hand, but inevitably the plants would suffer because it's really hard for us to keep up with 2 hours of hand watering every day. For weed prevention throughout the garden, we utilize several things. We use plastic landscape fabric on garden and tunnel edges. However, we avoid this at all costs where the plants grow. Instead, we focus on natural options like straw, hay, compost, and paper. All natural mulches have their pros and cons. This year, we went with mostly paper due to the ease of use and discovered that stakes are really the best for holding the edges of that paper in place. In the early spring, most of the paper we used outside of the tunnels was shredded into lots of little pieces after several storms. But paper is a very effective natural mulch when the weather is calm and when used inside a tunnel. We typically lay down the paper a few days prior to planting so that we can wet it down, allow it to shrink so that when we do plant, we know everything is going to stay in its place. We plan on using it again this year since it cut out hundreds of hours of weeding.
Growing most of the food we eat is a big time commitment, but it's also incredibly rewarding. And we know many of you are in the same place, trying to eat better, be more intentional, and cook more from scratch while still balancing real life. For bread and bakery items, if you're chasing that same real food, nutrient-focused lifestyle, but aren't ready or able to grow your own grains or bake sourdough from scratch every week, Wildgrain is worth checking out. Wildgrain is the first bake from frozen subscription box for sourdough bread, fresh pastas, and artisanal pastries with options for gluten-free, vegan, and protein boxes. While a typical supermarket loaf takes about 20 minutes to make, Wildgrain uses a slow fermentation process that takes over 20 hours, which can make the bread easier to digest and allow for improved nutrient absorption. Their boxes are fully customizable, and every order donates 2 meals to a food security nonprofit of your choice at no extra cost. I love that they don't cut corners and make high-quality baked goods accessible to those that want better food and don't have time to make everything from scratch. That is good. Really good. If you want to check out Wildgrain, click my link in the description and use code SEASONAL30 for $30 off your first box, plus get free croissants for the life of your subscription. The first things that we plant in spring are onions, carrots, peas, lettuce, and potatoes. Potatoes are one of our staple crops. They provide a large amount of calories for the winter months when we don't have as much fresh food growing in the garden. It's a lot of work to get them planted, but usually once they are planted, they are easy to grow and it's smooth sailing from there. This year, our spring was very wet and cold, and we ran into a little bit of trouble. Unbeknownst to us, we planted the potatoes in an area of the garden that is a low point where the water pools and it doesn't drain well. So all the potatoes we planted a month prior rotted, and for the first time in 5 years, I had to order potato seed instead of using my save seed, and we replanted the whole area. I ordered enough replacements that I expanded the potato area to the back portion of the garden. We make a lot of mistakes in the garden each year, but because I never want to experience those same health problems again, giving up and buying food from the store is not an option. As I mentioned earlier, we strive to grow the most nutrient-dense food we possibly can. One of the ways we try to achieve that is by growing cover crops. Cover cropping prevents soil erosion, improves soil health, suppresses weeds, reduces pests, fixes nitrogen, and supports pollinators and wildlife. It has a ton of benefits that make it worth the cost and time of planting seeds and eventually terminating the crop. Early in the season, we planted a cool season cover crop mix under the muscadine grapes, and we terminated a cover crop that was in the adjacent garden beds that was grown over the winter and into the spring. Now that all the framework was set, the bulk of the planting began in May as we passed our last frost. We get flooding every year, but usually it stops when we get into summer. This year, it didn't stop after we planted. In one day, we would get 5 inches of rain, and then even more the next day. Unfortunately, our native soil isn't the best at draining. We already had all of our potatoes rot from the excessive rain once this year, and our newly planted potatoes seemed like they hardly stood a chance with the weather continuing this way. We finally started to see some success as we approached the beginning of June. Everything in our tunnels was protected, including strawberries, and our blueberries were also ready for harvest. As we would bring in a harvest, we would preserve what we couldn't eat fresh. We finished cleaning up all the hardneck garlic, and now we're gonna weigh it and see how much we got.
28.5.
We did our initial harvest of green beans. I brought them in and weighed them. We got about 9 pounds from that, and then I blanched and froze those.
And I knew there was more out there, so I did a second harvest late at night and chopped them up, got them all prepped. And so this what I have here is maybe a third of what I harvested that we're gonna pressure can and freeze. And before we do that, we're gonna weigh them all. On top. Oh, come on. Okay. 28 even. In the midst of growing, harvesting, and preserving food from the garden, we had some new things we wanted to add to the homestead this year. I was really afraid of getting stung, but I really wanted to start a beehive this year. It seemed like everything was going well for the first few weeks, but I just could not find the queen, and it didn't seem like the hive was thriving. After a month, I checked again, and the hive was now growing, and so we added more boxes to the hive for the bees to fill. The other thing we wanted to test this year was growing more food for our animals. We planted a lot of seeds in the pig pastures. The soil was super rocky and hard, so we broadcasted the seeds, and surprisingly, a lot of those seeds sprouted. Since we rotate the pigs, it allowed those crops time to grow and mature just in time for the pigs to move in and eat them. We still had to supplement this with pig feed because the crops were kind of like an appetizer, but they did help offset our costs a little bit, while still giving the pigs high quality feed. This was very much a test this year, but we will greatly expand on this in years to come. The third thing we did that was a huge win was moving the chicken tractors into our garden area. Every day, we moved them along the garden edges to weed, fertilize, and eat the bugs. They enjoy scratching and pecking, and we got to enjoy the fruits of their labor.
By July, the weather flipped to being hot and dry. Since we are in the southern US, our climate can be harsh in the summer. That was the case this year as we had multiple heat advisories. The weather was 95 degrees or above, and we also had high humidity, making it feel like at least 110 degrees Fahrenheit or more. This weather is hard on us, it's hard on our animals, and it stresses the plants out. Because we had to replant the potatoes so many times, they had to grow through our hot summer. The soil was way too hot, so we added a ton of mulch to cool it down. Another thing that came in July was the arrival of the pests. We picked off potato bugs and blister beetles from the potatoes, and we lost our first crop of squash to squash bugs. Usually I plant a variety of squash that is resistant to the bugs, but I wanted to experiment this year, and it was a flop, but also a good reminder to only grow varieties that work for our area. So at the end of July, we planted another round of squash and covered it with insect netting to avoid squash bugs for as long as possible. We also planted another round of cucumbers since our first planting succumbed to cucumber beetles. We protected those cucumbers with the insect netting as well. Despite all the pest and disease pressure, we still managed to bring in large amounts of tomatoes, peppers, melons, and lettuce. As the tomatoes came in, I would preserve them every few days by making ketchup, salsa, and pizza sauce. 25 pounds. That's good.
At the beginning of August, the corn was ready to harvest. We got the first really good harvest, and after that, we quickly realized we had a problem.
Oh, I'm so excited. Yay. Something got him?
Raccoons got some of them.
Ah, shoot.
Back here. We're picking corn, and there's evidence of raccoons that are getting in and getting a little midnight snack. So we're gonna take care of the raccoons tonight. So I came out to the garden this morning to do a few things, and I noticed we pretty much accidentally caught a raccoon in our traps. These have been out here for a few days, and I haven't really refreshed the bait, but nonetheless we caught one. So I'm gonna take this guy out and make sure that he never returns. So let's do that now. Hey, little guy. In addition to the corn, one day our apples entirely disappeared from the orchard. We assumed it was a raccoon or possibly some squirrels. It was hard to experience more setbacks, but we always persevere and push forward. The harvest kept coming in, and we reached the height of preserving, making something new every day to stash in the freezer or the pantry for cold winter days. Just when the garden is at its peak of abundance and it's hard to keep up with how much the garden is giving, it's time to plant for a fall harvest. Usually we are planting about mid-August, but this year we started a little earlier so that we could plant some cowpeas, another succession of green beans, and some carrots inside and outside the tunnel. Then we added some broccoli, lettuce, radishes, celery, and cabbages to the mix. Planting in the heat of the summer is difficult, but we never regret having fresh vegetables in the fall and all throughout the winter. And they always seem to taste so much better in the wintertime too. In late August, we had to address a positive problem in our tunnel. Our grape plants were planted in the spring and had exploded with growth. I built the trellis, and we set to work pruning and tying up the grapes that had sprawled all over the ground way quicker than we thought they would. We successfully trellised all the grapes, and by September, we reached the home stretch of our harvest from the garden. We were looking forward to our potato harvest, but had a sense of trepidation because of all the problems that we had in the spring. So Becky and I knew the north area of the garden was the place to start, since all those potatoes grew in soil with better drainage. Thankfully, it was as we thought, and those potatoes grew well, and we got a really good harvest from that area. After that, it was time to harvest the south potato patch. Those did grow green leaves, but only a few plants actually developed tubers.
One row done.
There's our spoils.
Very small amount down there.
Well, I didn't weigh it, but it looks like 4 pounds.
Whoa, whoa.
The harvest there was disappointing, so we were pretty glad that we had planted in 2 areas this year. It ended up being pretty much our worst potato harvest ever, but we had other crops to make up for the shortfall. We had a little scare when we went to harvest our sweet potatoes, but thankfully it all worked out in the end.
I came across my sweet potatoes and the leaves were looking really good, really lush and green. I'm like, maybe I should just take a peek at these. And I was like, oh boy, there was this huge tunnel and my sweet potato looking like this. And I'm like, oh no. So I reach over to the next plant and same thing, huge area just completely dug out. So we're thinking it's like some kind of a groundhog that is eating these just based on the size of the holes that were here. Okay, these ones look good.
Yeah. So after those first few that we picked that were rodent eaten, that scared us, the next 20 that we've picked have been rodent free. So, and untouched. So I'm thinking that was a blessing in disguise that they ate those and we saw them. It kind of scared us into harvesting these, because perhaps if we'd have waited 2 more weeks, they may have all been eaten. In addition to the sweet potatoes, the second planting of squash was successful, and we brought in a ton of zucchini, eating a lot of it fresh and then shredding the rest of it to put in the freezer. We also had an amazing harvest of cucumbers, probably one of our best ever. Preserved them by fermentation, canning, and making a lot of refrigerator pickles.
Some of our best harvests this year came from planting later in the season. In addition to the zucchini and cucumber harvest, we also harvested winter squash. This was yet another crop we initially lost to the squash bugs, but with our second planting, we got the harvest we hoped for. Other things we planted later in the season, like cowpeas and another succession of green beans, were ready for harvest in late September and early October. Luckily, our first frost held off long enough for us to harvest everything off the plants. And even though early in the season we lost a lot of our sweet corn to the raccoons, we learned from our mistakes, put up an electric fence around our dent corn, and were able to get a harvest off of those in the fall too. This year on the homestead has taught us so much. We've learned how everything works better together. Chickens following through the garden beds, turning weeds and scraps into rich manure. Then cover crops coming in to protect the soil, feed it through winter, and make way for spring planting. Layer by layer, the ground gets healthier. The food that comes from it is fresher, more nutrient dense, and free of chemicals. Our bodies can feel the difference. We have more energy, better health, and meals that actually nourish us. We harvest in abundance, then preserve what we can. At the end of the season, jars line the shelves so summer's flavors carry us through winter. Those long days in the kitchen aren't just about food. They're time together as a family, teaching, laughing, and passing down something real. None of this has been perfect. There were late nights building tunnels, the wind tearing our greenhouse plastic, crops that didn't make it, and a new baby arriving right in the middle of it all. But through every challenge, we saw resilience take root. In the soil, in our systems, and in us. All the things we set up, like diversity in the garden, animals working alongside plants, resting the ground when it needs it, it all builds a strong, living ecosystem working together and getting better each year. If anything in this year's journey stirred something in you, if you felt even a quiet pull towards growing a little more of your own, we'd love to pass that encouragement on. Start small, raise a few chickens, grow something your family can eat straight from the soil, and preserve the harvest. You don't need a big place or perfect conditions, just a little willingness to learn alongside nature. Thank you for being a part of our year. With a new year beginning, now's the time to get your hands in the soil. It's waiting.